Welcome to Lift Talk, where we talk about lifting. This is episode 5, and I was joined by Rory Lynch to talk about all things competition day. We spoke about how to maximize your day on the platform, whether international competition complicates this, and much more. Enjoy the episode. Rory, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
Mate, we just had a bit of a tour of the gym. Tell everyone what you think of the place.
It's really, really cool. It's very obvious that a lot of effort has been put into the way that it's set up and getting all of the right equipment and laying it out right. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Well, I'm not actually responsible for any of that, but I'll pass the compliment on to the big bosses. So, man, I want to know what your first interaction with physical culture was, and how did that develop into a love for lifting?
So basically, I was a fat, nerdy kid up until the end of primary school. And my parents were like, you got to start doing sport. I played a little bit of sport, but like nothing seriously. And I got pushed into a taekwondo class. And I ended up absolutely falling in love with that. And I did martial arts for about 8 years. And as part of that, I started going to the high school gym, which was appalling, but it also only cost $10 a year because it was a high school gym.
$10 a year.
$10 a year.
That is unbelievable.
You had to go to like a orientation session where one of the PE teachers would walk around and be like, hey, this is a bench press. And that was like the entirety of the safety briefing. As there was a bunch of teenagers like let loose in a weight room, right?
What can go wrong?
Right. And it wasn't good. I didn't know what I was doing, but that was absolutely my first time doing that. And then I moved away and I couldn't find a martial arts gym that I liked. So I started going to the gym sort of more regularly and eventually found a powerlifter who was like, hey, you should come to a meet. Did the meet. Really, really fun. So here I am.
Nice. What age were you when you did your first meet?
That was 2014, so I think I was 20.
Yeah, okay. So I remember when we met at the coaching course a couple of months ago now, I remember we spoke about like our backgrounds and like when we got into the sport and when we got into coaching, and I just figured like you're New Zealand version of me, so we'll get you on the show and we'll chat. But I feel like you're a lot more eloquent than I am, so you'll at least add a bit more value there. So you got a lot of experience as a game day coach, and I wanted to get you on to talk a lot about sort of game day strategy and stuff like that. So what would you say are some of the main things that lifters and coaches do wrong or focus too heavily on when it comes to competition day?
The biggest thing that I would say is that people over-index on training data. So what I mean by that is that we get a bunch of information about the way that people respond to training in the gym. And then we generally try to use that to project what competition performance looks like. And the mistake is that a lot of people hold on to that information even when they start seeing things on comp day which doesn't line up with that anymore. So comp day is a very different environment. You're typically at a different body weight. A lot of people will cut coming into a competition. So they're not at the same body weight. They may be being held to different standards if they haven't been training to the right standard. They'll often be in different equipment, a different physical location. They may have slept poorly because they're excited or jet lagged or something like that. And so holding on to that information and that plan when it's no longer relevant is a really big mistake that a lot of people make.
Yeah, so the most useful data, I guess, is the most recent data, which is like what you're actually seeing in front of you. How do the warm-up speed look? How's your technique holding up? How do they look in the face so they look confident? Like those are the kind of things that you can't really write down on a competition plan.
That's right, which isn't to say you shouldn't have a competition plan. You should absolutely have a competition plan. You should just know that you are going to get updated information as the day progresses, and you need to incorporate that into the plan as you go.
Yeah, I've said a lot of times before that the game day plan evolves in front of your eyes, and that it happens as the day goes along. You don't refer back to your sheet. Like I will see a lot of coaches, and you do this with your clipboard, but you're writing down stuff that's going on in the day, and doing maths and stuff on the clipboard, as opposed to here's my attempts written down, my openers, my second, my third for all my lifts. And then it's almost like the coach doesn't even watch the lift. They just look at their sheet. Okay, what's the second attempt? And then they write that down. And it's like, we need to actually watch what's going on in front of us and make a decision based off what we're seeing.
The ultimate sin, and I've actually seen this recently from a coach that people look up to, is to write down the second attempt before you've even completed the first attempt. That just tells me that you are not paying attention to the information that you're being given in that moment at all.
I actually do that, but I'll write down the first number because it'll be like, okay, The opener's 200. The second's going to be 2 something. I'm going to write down the 2 just to like get ahead.
That's fair.
I'm just saving.
You're not going
like,
to jump to 300.
I'm saving 1 second. So when it comes to meet day performance and like, what should we actually be focusing on? And like, maybe let's talk about how do we develop a plan that has sort of some safe falls written into it where we can play the day ahead of us, but also be prepared.
Yeah. So if we're talking about building a plan that incorporates that information, where I would start is having goals that aren't entirely based around specific numbers. Sometimes specific numbers are going to be relevant and you may want to keep them in mind. For example, if there's a qualifying total that you need to hit for something, it may not actually matter how your second deadlift moves. If you need to hit a particular number on your third, you may load it regardless. And I think that that's absolutely fair. But the majority of the plan and the majority of the goals and priorities should be based around things that are flexible depending on the day. And so that may mean things like my goal is to place as high as possible in this meet, which means if you get to your second deadlift and first is just not going to happen, discard it. And instead you think about what you need to do to come second or third or maybe fourth or eighth, depending on where you already are. So yeah, first thing, not putting too much stock in specific numbers. The second thing that I would say is you need to open at an appropriate weight. If you open too heavy, you give yourself no wiggle room. And so if you're having a day where your top end is lower for some reason than it might otherwise be, and instead of opening at what you thought was 90%, you're now opening at 96 or 97%, you're going to have a really bad day.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people open based off of this training data, the first thing that you said. They will, do a single at 8, and then they'll plug that into the RPE calculator, and it will tell them that their max is some ridiculous number that it isn't. And then they'll work backwards based off of that, and they'll put this opener in, and then they end up taking, this could be someone who's aiming to squat like 350, and they end up taking 10 kilo jumps or like 7.5 kilo jumps. And you've basically just done 3 maxes at that point. So like 100% vibe with the opening heavy thing. That's something that has annoyed me for such a long time. And you can see it in the warm-up room. Like this lift is 15 minutes out and their second last warm-up was hard. Like go run over to the scoreboard and figure out what their opener is. They are going to add 25 kilos to that. Like this person's going to have a bad day. And like a lot of time, like I will know people well, and I'll just have a chat with them before the comp. What are your openers? They'll tell me, and in my head, I'm thinking, like, today might not be good.
Almost irrespective of what your goals for the day are, one of the things that you should probably trying to do is make a lot of attempts.
Yeah.
Like if you want to win a meet, you want to be going at least 7 for 9, preferably 8 or 9 for 9. If you want to hit a PR total, you probably want to be going 8 or 9 for 9. If you want to be hitting a record total, you probably want to be going 8 or 9 for 9. And that means you probably want to open somewhere between 88 and 92% of what your actual max is. Not what you hope your max is, not what the 1RM calculator spits out your max as, what your actual max on the day is.
Yeah.
Which probably means you need to see the warm-ups because that may not be the same day that you had in training. It might be better, but it might also be worse.
Yeah. So we've spoken now about openers. What about second attempts? This is going to be a bit of a range because we need to watch the opener, see how it moves before we then take the jump. How do you sort of write this into a plan or communicate this to your athletes about like what the plan for the second is going to be?
So something that we haven't touched on is often I'll install a comp plan sort of about a week before the competition after the last hard training. And at that point, we'll establish what we think is a reasonable range for the second attempt. From the stayers already going sideways, what's the bottom end of what we think is going to be something that we can still make progress on, but it's a reasonably solid attempt that we could be left with, right up to the stayers going excellently. What's the top end of that? And so we've already got this range in mind, and that's more of a guide because, of course, things go out the window. You change the opener, whatever. So that's where I start from. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way that I look at second attempts is that's my indicator. Yep. That's going to give me, like we said before, the most recent piece of information to what we have left.
Yep.
And that could be a range, like you said. I can't remember what my next question was. Might want to cut this out, Chris.
Absolutely not.
Let's go back to some of the factors that actually affect the meet day performance.
Yep.
Let's delve into that a little bit deeper. So you mentioned body weight, and one of the things that I see a lot is people will have let's say an 83 kilo lifter. They'll have a morning body weight of 86, and then they'll train in the PM, and they'll be 88 kilos when they train, and they'll only think that it's a 3 kilo cut, but really it's a 5 kilo cut. When you have someone in this kind of situation, how do you explain sort of what the differences in your actual platform weight are versus your training weight? Like, how do you get that idea across to them that it's going to be different?
So although I said body weight earlier, what I typically will talk about with the athlete is hydration status. And so if we're talking about an athlete who's 86 in the morning, 88 when they're actually training, we're going to use that as 100%, right? Like you are 100% hydrated. You're, full sized effectively at this point. When you weigh in, what body weight are you actually going to be? 83 kilograms. I can't do that math in my head, but that's something like a 6% dehydration at that point. Six.
Got him. We got him.
This is an elaborate setup to pull that off. About a 6% cut, right? So they're down to 94% at the time of weigh-in. And then they've got typically 2 hours. They may have 24 hours in some federations. If the meet's running late, they may get a little bit more. And from there, they're going to be able to get from 94% up to between 95 and 97% of full size, right? And so that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be 3% weaker, but it does mean that they're going to be 3% smaller. And so what I'm talking to them about is this is the size and hydration status that you're normally training at. Being dehydrated by 1 or 2% may not affect your performance. Being dehydrated by 3 to 5% definitely is going to. And so maybe we need to be looking at historic information. How did you respond to your last water cut? If it's your first water cut, you should be doing a small one. If you've done it before, maybe we can talk about doing a bigger one. Should you actually be cutting for this meet at all, which is a whole separate question. And then using that to sort of scale those expectations back appropriately. And of course, that's going to affect the squat the most because that's first and you're most dehydrated at that point. It affects bench because bench seems to be most innately tied to how heavy you are on the day. And it tends not to affect deadlifts as much, though you may be cramping as well if you're doing a big water cut. But the actual body weight seems not to affect deadlift too much.
Would you ever use a trial cut during a prep?
All the time. Yeah,
yep.
All the time. I very rarely...
Typically, where would you time that?
Usually I would try to time it during a deload because I don't want it to mess with their training either, right? Training is actually more important than the water cut. And so what I'll often do is usually around 2 cycles out, we'll go, okay, we're going to do a practice water cut. We'll see how much you lose, and we'll do the last day of the water cut, like your simulation weigh-in, will be a training day, and we'll get you to train about 2 hours after you weigh in and see how that actually feels compared to your previous training.
And how good is that subjective information on how someone feels as opposed to using it for an actual heavy session and getting more objective data? How do you kind of weigh that up?
Because meet days are so much different from training, I don't think that there is incredible value in taking a heavy training, potentially compromising that heavy training by making the person do it dehydrated, potentially putting them at risk, but getting slightly better information out of it. What I think is more useful is for the athlete to have an understanding of what it feels like to go through that process, particularly if they haven't before, and then having sort of a subjective idea of what that training feels like. I've a couple of times done it as a simulation meet, even though it's a deload, we might work up to a RPE 8 squat single just to feel it out.
So a 10?
Sometimes a 10. RPE 8 with a deload, I think is what the cool kids call it.
The misgrooved 8.
RPE 8 with a misgroove.
Cool. So let's go back to more of those reasons or more of those things that people do wrong on comp day. Let's talk about actual training. What are some of the pitfalls that people have in training that they then take into their competition plan?
The absolute key one, and it drives me nuts, I do it as well, is not training to comp standard. Your bench press, at least the singles, they need to be paused, and they need to be paused for a reasonable amount of time. Your squat needs to be to depth in training basically all of the reps. Your deadlift needs to be properly locked out, and you need to hold it at lockout You don't need to hold it for 10 seconds, but if you can't hold it for 2 seconds, you're probably going to have a bad day. You shouldn't be hitching your singles. You shouldn't be double moving anything, right? Like all of those things mean that information doesn't really apply to what you're going to do on comp day.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're sort of like trying to extrapolate training data out from work that's not competition standard, like I think squatting high is probably the best example because, people might not get that end range of strength and stability and control and stuff. And then they might find that they actually do it on the comp day and they're like considerably weaker.
Yep.
Do you think the onus is on the athlete in this situation, or do you think the onus is more on the coach to like keep them in line?
I think it's hard to just draw a clear line between those. Like,
give me a pie chart.
Sure. I think it's predominantly on the athlete. The athlete needs to take accountability for their own training and make sure that their own training, the same way that their own nutrition and their own sleep need to be on point. Part of a coach's job is to hold people accountable, though. So if you are a coach and you see somebody squatting high, it's your responsibility to call it out. You can't do the squat for them. You can't go in and like make them squat deeper, but you absolutely need to be telling them.
Yeah. So the next one you mentioned was like gym atmosphere.
Yep.
And like being comfortable in your environment. What do you think this actually does to lifters when they get put into a competition environment?
It massively changes your mental state when the environment is uncomfortable. A lot of us, people who are powerlifters, are very comfortable in the gym. Some of us are spending 2 to 4 hours, 3 to 6 times a week in the gym, and so that's a comfortable, happy place, right? You go to competition and everything is different. There will be people watching you, which you may not be used to, including referees, audience. The music may not be what you prefer. You may have to listen to speakers rather than your own headphones. You will be in a skin-tight singlet, which not everybody is super comfortable about that feeling or the way that they might look like that, and that can really get in your head if you let it. It also means that everything that you do on comp day is done to somebody else's schedule. In the gym, you can lift as soon as you're ready. And if you're not ready, you can take an extra couple of minutes to get ready. On comp day, you've got 60 seconds. And if you're not ready, tough. Like you either have to take the lift or time out.
Yeah. And that's something that I like to practice with my lifters as well, particularly the ones that I see in person. I tell them, hey, 5 minutes and you're doing your set. And all right, you're up. And at first it's like, oh, like shit, I'm going right now. Okay. But I think once you get used to that being on somebody else's schedule, it is actually really helpful to get into a competition environment. I think the other one also is like you're in a gym you may not have been in before.
Yep.
You don't know where the bathrooms are.
Yep.
You don't know where your stuff is. You don't know like where the rack is that you're going to warm up on and then where the platform is. Do you have any advice for people who are like going into a new place for the first time? Like what can they do to make themselves comfortable in a new gym?
So one of the things that I do as a coach is almost like a familiarization session. If I can, I'll do it a day before and I'll get the athlete and I'll walk them around the venue and I'll be like, I'll get them up on the platform. Like, hey, this is where you're going to be standing. This is where the referees are going to be. That's where the audience is going to be. There's lights in all of these places.
Yeah, pick a spot to look at.
If you're doing visualization exercises, this is specifically what you're visualizing. This is the warm-up area. This is where the bathroom is. This is where I'm going to meet you tomorrow. And this is the time that I'm going to meet you here. And so that kind of thing can really help.
Yep. I think that's really important too. Like, yeah, show them around. Like, okay, if you need me, I'll be here. If you need to go to the bathroom, I'll wait for you here. Those kind of things really helpful. Do we miss anything on the stuff that's different in competition? I'm trying to think. Sleep.
Yeah. So before competition, you will typically be quite nervous, and so people don't always sleep well when they're nervous. You may have to get up early, particularly if you've got a 6 a.m. weigh-in, and particularly if you're close on body weight, you might be up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to double check your body weight or to travel to the venue. You may be sleeping in an unfamiliar environment. If you've had to travel for the meet, you might be in a hotel, a motel, a camper van, I don't know. And none of that contributes to good sleep either, right? And so that can definitely make a difference on comp day.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. All right, let's shift to more important comp day stuff, which is like international competition. Not to say that local stuff's not important, but You've been involved in a lot of New Zealand powerlifting sort of world teams and international teams and stuff. Can you talk about like what's your role been in all of those?
Sure. So there is, I guess, 4 roles that I've done through all of these competitions. The first, and I guess the most straightforward, is that I'm a referee. So I'm now a Category 1 referee, which means I get to wear I guess, the pretty red tie, and I referee some of the meets. So straightforward. Uh, a little bit less straightforward, it would be the coaching role, which is pretty straightforward, which is less straightforward than refereeing, but, show up, you do the coaching. Your responsibilities sort of span from getting that lifter to weigh-ins, weight in, doing the competition, that's sort of it. I've also been head coach a number of times, and that comes with at least the way that the New Zealand Powerlifting Federation has it set up. It can vary country to country. That comes with a sort of administrative burden, which includes things like making sure the entire team knows which lifters are on which platform and which coaches are going to be supporting that person, because you'll probably have team coaches rather than sort of, individual coaches.
So the head coach is kind of like an overseer of all the other coaches, and then the other coaches are the ones actually with the lifter on the day.
So at least the way that New Zealand structures it, the head coach will also be doing coaching roles, but from usually around a month out, they will also be setting up you're going to be with this athlete on this day. You're going to be with that athlete on this day. If you need extra people, we'll figure that out now. Like, that's the kind of additional things that they're doing.
Talk me through your most memorable experience with the New Zealand team as a coach. I know you didn't prepare for this one, but I'm just putting you on the spot.
Okay, I think I had a really memorable time. I'm not going to say great time. I had a really memorable time at the Junior World Championships.
Not a great time.
last year in 2022. So I was the head coach of the team, but I was also the only coach on the team. So there wasn't very many athletes from our team that year. It was in a place called Silivri in Turkey, which is sort of an hour and a half outside of Istanbul. And it was absolute chaos.
First of all, why are powerlifting comps always in the fucking worst places?
Okay. I actually know the answer to that.
Is it because it's too expensive to have it in the main city?
That is part of it, yeah. So countries bid for competitions, and then that country or that country's federation usually picks a meet director, and that meet director sort of has carte blanche about how they're going to run it. And so the 2 places that we end up with are the place where the meet director happens to live, or a place that they can run a meet for a reasonable price, because powerlifting meets don't bring in a lot of money and they cost a bit to run. So you need they're not exactly profitable, but you at least need to be kind of breaking even.
Because some of I competed in Uzbekistan of all places back in 2015. Very cool, great story, but took 44 hours to get there.
Yeah.
Not the best.
Yeah, my first international was in Minsk in Belarus,
Yep.
which is a place that you're not even allowed to go anymore. So
there you go. We often hear about how we've spoken about how training is different from competition, but then we hear about how competition is different from competition when it comes to, a local level, and then there's a step up to the national level, and then there's a step up to the international level. We spoke about the difference between training and competition generally. What are the more specific stuff that makes it more difficult at an international level?
Cool. So
also, what kind of drop-off do you tend to see between sort of like a national level and an international level?
That's a great question. I'll leave that for right at the end. So what I'll do is I'll break it into two pieces of the answer. So the first piece is, one of the things that will change from sort of a national or a state level competition at an international level is that you're going from an environment where you may have done several meets before and you kind of know the drill, to an environment that's being run by a completely different set of people in a way that you may not understand. So that may mean that the meet runs very, very fast or very, very slow compared to how you're used to. It may mean that the venue is different to the way that you might expect. Okay, so as a specific example, a lot of these sessions at IPF Worlds run in about 2 hours and 40 minutes. A lot of local meets will take something like 5 or 6 hours to run. So if you're used to a meet taking 5 or 6 hours and suddenly you have to do everything from your squat warm-ups to your last deadlift in 2.5 hours, you're going to have a really, really different experience to that longer day. The second part is the part which is going to vary quite a lot depending on how far you have to travel, and that's the travel itself. So there's a couple of things that go into the travel. First of all, the travel itself is kind of brutal. Like you said, 44 hours to Uzbekistan. I had to take 4 flights to get to Malta this year. I didn't even have to lift at the end of it, and I felt awful. If I'd had to squat, that would have been terrible.
But you can't squat anyway, so.
I can't squat anyway, so that's fine. But imagine if I did. And so that means sitting in a plane potentially for 44 hours, maybe 10 or 12-hour blocks of not really moving, eating airplane food, sort of getting maybe a little bit bloated, not really sleeping, jet lag, all of those kinds of things that go into the travel. Then once you get there, you may not be able to find the food that you're used to. You may not be able to sleep well because now you're in a new environment. In Belarus, the sun only set for about 2 hours every night between sort of 2 and 4 a.m. And so sleep was just like completely ruined, right? Really, really hard to find the food that you might be looking for. All of those kinds of things. You may not be able to find a sauna or that kind of stuff. And so you might be doing last minute weight manipulations and none of it works the way that you're used to it working. So all of those kinds of things sort of contribute to international meets being a very different beast. As far as drop off, it varies quite a lot because some people handle that stuff really well and some people don't.
Do you find any correlation between the types of people who handle it well and the types that don't?
Yes. So things that help you handle it well, having done it before, like you go through the experience a couple of times and you sort of get a little bit used to it. People who train closer to their competition weight, the less you have to weight cut, the less everything is going to affect you. Being a less highly strung person helps. People who get anxious and nervous very easily, these are the people who get more affected by the whole travel
experience. Is that not every
every
powerlifter though?
It's certainly a lot of them. Yeah, it's certainly a lot of them. The other thing that can help is traveling early. So the typical advice is 1 day per time zone that you have to cross, which means if you're from New Zealand or Australia and you're traveling to Malta, for example, that's sort of 8 to 10 time zones that you have to cross. So if you can travel 8 to 10 days in advance, that typically helps.
Man, that would be expensive.
Yeah.
8 to 10 extra days of accommodation and all that. I remember listening to Chance Mitchell. He went to Worlds was that the one at South Africa, the one that he won?
Yep.
And he mentioned that he stopped in Dubai for a week and he teed up a couple of seminars and trained there.
Yep.
So he did like half the travel and then the rest of the half of the travel. And obviously that helped him. He won World Championship. So that's like great advice.
So Dubai is Dubai is in the same time zone as South Africa. So even though he still had a 10-hour flight, it was his day-night cycle didn't shift over that, which helps.
No change in sleep, which is a huge advantage, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we can talk more specifically about game day coaching at an international comp. So we're kind of merging both topics here.
Yep.
What are the things that you think people do wrong at an international level from a coaching perspective?
The biggest one, I think, is being unprepared. So one of the things that makes something like the World Championships a little bit different to coaching at a local meet, aside from the pressure, is that the talent pool is way, way deeper. There's a lot of local meets that you can, if you're a strong enough lifter, you can just win by the fact that you're the strongest person there. You go to something like the Asia Championships or the World Championships, and you go from potentially being quite a big fish in, a regular sized pond to quite a big fish in a really big ocean full of big fish. And so that can mean that the competition gets much, much, much tighter. And that means that things like knowing how lot numbers work on comp day becomes much more important. Knowing what happens if two people lift the same weight, knowing exactly how they decide what is a record and what isn't, and the way that changes as people hit records. Those kind of minutiae can make the difference between a person coming first and coming second in a competition.
Yeah, and like literally one missed lift could have you fall from 3rd to 10th. Yep. Which is really important as well, which comes back to the importance of no matter what level of competition you're at, the goal should always be to make your lifts.
Yeah, so if you recall the 74 kilo Open World Championships this year, the difference between first and third was 0.5 kilograms. So the first two guys finished on exactly the same total. And so there was body weight, and then the next guy was half a kilogram behind.
Yeah, that session was insane.
That was brutal.
What's the biggest coaching blunder that you've seen at World Championships? And like, please call the people out.
The French coaches coaching Jard Jacob at the 57 kilo Open Worlds this year put in the wrong number for her last deadlift. She needed, I want to say, I forget the exact number, but she needed approximately 230 kilograms to win. They loaded 228. I think they were off by a kilogram. So it may have been she needed 229 to win, and they loaded 228. It was something like that. So they loaded it a kilo too light. And so something I'll say, she missed the lift, and I'm actually happy that she missed the lift, which I'm not very happy about often because it meant that she didn't lose by 1 kilogram because of a math error. So
she would have missed the extra kilo anyway, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, that's
with
right.
the placing. But
that's right.
So they put in the lift that they thought was for the win, and it was actually for second.
And it was for second. She was already second. It was to move her from second to more second, like it was
to better second,
to better second, and like that's basics, right? Doing the math right is basics.
Yeah, I once saw a lifter at a national event needing to change his third deadlift and waited too long, and it was like bars loaded, and then they handed it in, and that was like, and the lifter went out to an attempt that he knew because they didn't change the load. He knew that it wasn't for the win, and he absolutely smoked it. And I think he needed like 2.5 more.
That's heartbreaking.
And all of us in the crowd were like, "Bro, like, come on, you've got to be better than that."
That's heartbreaking. Like, can you imagine smoking the lift, knowing you had more, but not being able to do a single thing?
And then just looking at your coach like, "Bro."
I wouldn't blame that person once they realize that it's not for the win, just like not even going out, right? Like there's an injury risk for every lift that you make. If it's not for anything, like if that person was just like, nah, I'm just gonna go sit in the back and cry for a little bit or something, like that would
seriously, that would
be okay.
That's so heartbreaking. Okay, let's talk about scouting. Now, when you're at an international event, you mentioned really deep talent pools. You have to be aware of what everyone's capable of. I actually think scouting is kind of overrated because I think you can get all these ideas in your head about what you think's going to happen, but you really have no fucking idea what is actually going to happen. How do you handle scouting? Do you think it's useful in some respects? How is it not useful? What's overrated about it?
So very similar to how we started this, the most important information is the information in front of you on the day. And so all of the scouting in the world is, I think scouting is good. I'll get back to that. I think scouting is generally good. But if the information that you're seeing in the moment doesn't agree with your scouting report, you throw the scouting report out. You follow the information that's in front of you.
Yep.
Where scouting does come into play, and I do it for big meets in particular, is some lifters have ways that they behave, which might not be obvious when you just watch their Instagram or just watch a meet or two from them, that become apparent when you go back and look at their competition history. So some examples of that are, there are some lifters who only ever take jumps of the same amount. And so if I can look at a lifter and know either in kilograms or as a percentage, if he is opening at this weight, the range for his top end is going to be this. And I know that because I've seen him do it 8 times in a row. That's actually pretty useful information.
Yep.
At times.
Yep. I think that's a really good place to start because, and I also think you can extrapolate out what kind of jumps they take on the squat to what kind of jumps they're going to take on the bench, and then what kind of jumps they're going to take on the deadlift. Even if you haven't done that scouting, even if you're just looking at what they've done for squat, you can get a good idea of where you think they're roughly going to aim for or where they're going to end up with the other two.
Yep. It can also give you ideas about like who makes lifts and who doesn't, right? Like there are some lifters who average 5 for 9. And of course, they can pull out a great day and go 9 for 9, but history doesn't think that that's likely. And like knowing that in advance gives you a little bit of information. It may affect the way you make some decisions.
Yeah. What do you think is kind of overrated about scouting then?
People are human and they change their mind and they change what they want all the time. And particularly when you get to things like world championships, where somebody might have goals that you know nothing about, they're going to make decisions based around those goals. And so if you attempt to predict what they're going to do based on information that you have, you can't necessarily have everything that they have. For example, if somebody has a Australian national record they want to break, that's like one of their side quests for the day, right? But I don't know what the Australian national record is. I didn't look because there's 50 competitors in this class or whatever, and I just like didn't have time to do all of it. They may make decisions based around hitting that total that I can't project. And so A scouting report that tells you exactly what numbers somebody's going to hit that's way overrated. That's not useful. That's hubris, right? Nobody can tell the future like that.
Yeah. And also, like, you can develop a bunch of, like, if this, do this. But then if you're in a pool of 15 people who could potentially get a placing, how many decision trees does that end up becoming? It ends up becoming just an overwhelming amount of information, which is all based on, like, complete conjecture.
Yep.
Like, we have no idea what's going to happen. And I think that we just keeps coming back to that. It's like, you can write down this plan and you can have it all in front of you and ready to go. But once the day starts, like, don't even look at the plan. Like, watch what's going on in front of you. Look at the scoreboard, do the right maths, like, you know, have all your ducks in a row from understanding the rules and blah, 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 blah. That's how you win. That's how you get the most out of your lifters.
Yep. I would say that unless that there is a particular discipline record you're going for, like a squat or a bench, and you're in competition for that record with somebody else, usually I wouldn't even watch what other people are doing on the squat and the bench, except to give me an idea of what they might do on the deadlift. Usually the goal for squat and bench is go 6 for 6. No matter what anyone else does, I said it again, by the way. No matter what anyone else does, get all of your attempts for squat and bench. We can worry about where you're going to place when we get to deadlifts.
I actually kind of slightly disagree with that. I think that there's merit in watching what others are doing, because if you're in a field and everyone's taking small jumps to their third and maybe you're squatting last so you can already see what they've put in, you might then be at an advantage to also take a small jump just to be conservative and, like, make sure that you make.
Yep.
And by the same token, if everyone's putting in bigger jumps and you can kind of predict, like, okay, I watched your last one, I don't think you're going to get this one. Like, I can be now a little bit more conservative.
So a mistake that people make there is that they'll be looking ahead at the prognosis totals, right? And they'll be going, okay, so on prognosis, this person is coming in at some total, say 600, just for the sake of example. If they total this, their prognosis is going to move to 605. So if you don't know what prognosis is, that's a projection on the score sheet of where they'll end up, including the openers of everything that hasn't happened yet and the lifts that they've actually made of the discipline that's going. And so we can go, okay, if this person makes this squat, on prognosis, they're going to move from 600 to 605. On prognosis, I'm currently 605 and I'm heavy or all lighter, so maybe I should bump my squat by 2.5 kilograms so that I'm still ahead on prognosis. The trap there is that I lie about my openers all the time, and most of my athletes do, and lots of other coaches lie about their openers all the time as well. Or they're not intentionally lying. They just change the plan while they're warming up because the plan was not the right plan for the day.
Yeah. I see it more of like an individual discipline by discipline type of thing. Like, you know, you could potentially change your attempt in order to get a squat medal.
Yep.
In order to get a bench press medal, because you know what the other's doing. And if you're going last, obviously that gives you that advantage to be able to then look at what everyone's putting in.
Yep.
And then make the decision.
That's fair. And if the only thing that you're at the World Championships or some other big meet for is a discipline medal or a discipline record, I think that's totally appropriate. If you're there to be placing overall, I do still think that you're probably better to be focusing on building the total, even if it means you move from gold to silver on a discipline medal or something like that, but actually capture the kilos instead of risk missing another 2.5 or another 5 or something.
I guess kind of what I'm thinking is like, you know, let's say you've got up to 300 in you, but everyone else has done worse than what you expected. You maybe don't need to push all the way to 300. Maybe you take 295, 297.5, and you play it safe because you've got that lead. Does that make sense?
Yep. The difficult bit is that it's very hard to know with 100% certainty that you've got 300. In reality, it's probably more like I'm 80% sure I've got 300. I'm 99% sure I've got 295. I'm like 70% sure I've got 305. And so I'm doing a sort of probabilistic, like what am I likely
You're
to
weighing it up in your head. But let's say like it was a local meet and you watch the second attempt and you go, okay, I'm going to load 300.
Yeah.
You might then look at the scoreboard and go, okay, I don't actually need 300.
Yep.
I'm going to take a little bit less. And I think that can be a bit of an advantage too.
Yeah, I think so. And that plays into the making attempts thing, right? Like if you make attempts, you end up ahead on squat or ahead on subtotal, like that's a good position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about chips.
Yep.
So explain to everyone what chips are, how they can be useful. I also think they're a little bit overrated, but I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah, sure. So when we're referring to a chip, what we're talking about is a non-standard increment of weight. So normally in powerlifting, you have to take, with the exception of the World Powerlifting Federation, you normally have to take a 2.5 kilogram jump.
We can ignore that one.
All right, we'll ignore that one. 2.5 kilogram jump for every attempt, right? So you can take 300, you can take 302.5, you can't take 301. If you're going for a record at the appropriate level, so if you're at a national level and you're competing at a national event, a national record. If you're competing at the Worlds, it has to be a world record. You can't chip a national record at Worlds. You can take instead a 0.5 kilogram increment. Any weight, so it needs to be that is a multiple of 0.5. So if the record is 300, I could go 300.5, 301, 301.5, as high as I want. That's useful because it means that other people need to total more than you. And if they can't also pick up a chip along the way, that sometimes means that they need to go 2 kilograms or 1.5 kilograms more than you instead of just a little bit more than you. And so that means you end up with totals like, say, 600.5 kilograms. If I can't also get a chip, I can't total 601 kilograms. I have to go 602.5. And that little extra 1.5 kilograms or 2 kilograms, it can sometimes be enough to push people too far. That advantage only applies if you're not the lightest lifter. If you're the lightest lifter, everyone else has to total more than you anyway. So like it doesn't really matter. But if you're heavier than at least one person that you're worried about, it can be a very slight advantage that can add up.
And I see a lot of people getting the chips wrong. If they are a heavier lifter, they might go for a chip. Let's say someone they're lifting against has a chip on squat. They might go for the chip on bench, but they go for the same chip instead of taking the extra half kilo chip.
Yep.
And now they've just gotten an extra half kilo for no advantage.
Yep. So this is actually somewhere scouting can play a role because if you are looking ahead, you might go, oh, that person might be able to pick up a chip on bench. So is it an advantage or not for me to worry about it on squats? Should I just do my thing or should I try pick up that extra half a kilo and force them to do something weird when we get there? So yeah, if you're the heavier lifter and somebody else already has a chip, they've already picked up a half a kilogram somewhere, you need to match that and go an extra half a kilo. So if you squatted 300.5, I need to bench like 171 or something to get that extra 0.5 on you again.
Yeah, 100%. And I think people kind of look for a chip as a huge advantage when really it's only half a kilo or really it is 2.5 kilos in the total. And people chase this thing and often miss, and then they miss out on 10 or 12.5 kilos instead. And I think like a lot of times you're better off, unless you're like certain that it's a made lift. I think a lot of times you're better off just taking the regular increment that's 2.5 below the record and just securing those kilos anyway.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I very rarely change a plan in order to hit a record. If there's a record right next to a number that we're thinking about anyway, I'll usually get it on the way. Like if the record is 275 and we're like, 275 seems like about an appropriate second attempt, we'll probably go 275.5 and pick it up on the way. But if the original plan was 270, I'm not going up an extra 5 kilos for a half kilo record and potentially have you lose the whole 5 kilos or plus whatever else you may have had earlier. So is it an advantage? Yes, 100%. The size of the advantage is incremental though.
Yeah, it's small. Cool. All right, we're going to move to our Instagram question of the day.
Cool.
I haven't prepared you for this, but you will have a good answer. And if you do need me to go first, I can go first.
Okay.
It's from Chris Vagona, who's sitting behind the cameras.
Hey, Chris.
What is, in your opinion, is the greatest powerlifting performance of all time?
This is a fascinating question because I was on the way here organizing a King of the Lifts podcast about exactly this topic.
Oh, okay.
Wow, what is the greatest powerlifting?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay, so I was thinking about this. If you'd asked me like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I would have said Taylor Atwood 738.5.
Yep.
But if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said Jesus Oliveras at Sheffield. Mm-hmm. But now I actually think it's Austin Perkins from last weekend.
Okay.
851 at 74.2 or whatever he was. That, to me, when I saw it pop up on my Instagram, I like actually legitimately did not believe it. What did he squat? 313?
313, yeah.
Like that is just unbelievable. I remember in 2014, Finland Worlds. Was that the one that was in? Was it 2014
Yeah,
Finland?
yeah, that
or
sounds right.
15? I think it might have been 15. Lane Norton squatted 303,
303
at
at
93,
93.
and that was the world record.
Yep.
And now 2 weight classes below, well, effectively, he's almost 74. Effectively, 2 weight classes below, we have 10 kilos more on the squat. 2016, 83 kilo world record, John Hack 296. Was it 298? 298. And we've got now an extra 15 kilos on that at 1 weight class below. Like, unbelievable.
That's actually a good time to point out that the standards have moved phenomenally. I actually remember the Lane Norton squat record. That was the first World Championships I watched. I watched it on my laptop in bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I was in Finland and I was in New Zealand. And I was like, wow, that is amazing. The squat world record in that class now was like 332 or something. It's like 30 kilos higher than that.
Yep. That was the squat morning record. I think it still is the squat morning record.
World squat morning record. We should put that in a book somewhere. Okay, so one of the reasons, so the Austin Perkins performance is probably like if we were going to try come up with some objective formula of how good powerlifters are, which sure,
I mean, it's the best we've got.
it's the best we've got at the moment.
RPF points is garbage.
I hate it. Yeah, don't even look at it. That's the best performance that we've got by formula at the moment. But I don't know if it's the most groundbreaking performance. And so to me, something that is going to be an amazing performance is something that tells the world that something greater is possible than what we thought of previously. And so 851 at basically 74, incredible. It's only 11 kilos or something higher than the previous best total at about that weight class, which was Taylor Atwood. And so to me, when I'm looking for the greatest performance in history, what I'm looking for is a performance that maybe by modern standards may not actually be that good, right? There may be people doing better than that now. But where we look back at it and we go, that moved the boundaries for us. That told us that something bigger and better was possible. And so I'm going to cheat and not give a single one because I'm unprepared for this. But some examples of things that, at least to me, were incredible. The first time somebody squatted over 1,000 pounds, I was there in person for that. So maybe I'm like a little bit biased that was 2016. Sorry, that was the first time that somebody squatted over 1,000 pounds in an international meet.
Drug tested.
Drug tested, yes. Drug tested, raw with sleeves.
Walked out, stiff bar.
Walked out, yep. It was Jeza Uwepa at the 2016 Oceania Championships. And so before that, Ray Williams had squatted a little bit over 1,000 at a domestic meet. But that was the first time that the world record moved to 1,000.
He did 426 in Uzbekistan when I was there.
Jeza?
No.
Ray.
Ray was lifting as a guest, and he did 426. And he also did not eat while he was there. I think he was there about a week before the meet, and he couldn't eat because he didn't like the food.
This is what I'm saying about like not being able to find the food.
He lost 15 kilos.
15.
So he came as a guest for Australia. So he was like kind of hanging out with our team, and I was talking to him a lot. And he was like so nervous. And he's like, man, like I can't eat. Like I just missed chicken at home and all this stuff. And then still scored the world record. But that was 2015, 426.
Okay, so if I'm going to pick a single greatest performance, Ray Williams, the 477.5 squat.
What about the 490 that he did?
The 490 squat, it was at a domestic meet.
Okay, fair enough.
Super cool, obviously. Super cool. But it wasn't in his hometown, was it? It was like a national championships or something.
It was at the Arnold, I believe.
Oh, it was at the Arnold. Okay. It's not that I discount that. It's fantastic. Doing the same thing in front of, let's say, referees that are not friendly to you is like a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
So
the 1,000-pound squat, do you have any other examples? What about full meet performance?
Full meet performance.
Because I was close to saying Evie at Sheffield.
That was pretty groundbreaking.
Because it was like, was she a wildcard invite?
She was a regional invite.
Yeah. So it was almost like she was making up the numbers, or that's what people perceived. She was tipped to finish last by just about everyone.
Yep.
She kind of didn't really tell anyone she was going down a weight class, went down a weight class, and she was in the lead for the entire meet and just held on and won.
Yep.
And it was like...
Added like 25 kilos to the world record total or something.
Like unbelievable performance.
Yep. That's a pretty good one as well. Callie Johansson beating Taylor Atwood.
Was that this year?
That was this year. He beat him by half a kilogram, but
The junior?
yeah, he's a junior. Yeah. Is it the objectively greatest performance ever? No, like it was about a 778, 788, something like that at 74.
780.5 maybe?
So 780.5, is that what it?
I don't know.
It was a weird number somewhere in the 780s. But Taylor Atwood has been untouchable for like 6 years. If you told me a year ago that 2 people were going to beat him at the World Championships this year, I would have laughed at you. So that's a pretty memorable performance, even if it's not like objectively one of the greatest.
Yeah. I think Taylor's going through what I'm going through right now, which is the dad syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Of how hard it is to train being a father. Man, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll just wrap it up there. Your final job for the day, tell everyone where they can find you. Actually, before you do that, you've recently changed your Instagram handle to the most hilarious word ever to say with a New Zealand accent. I'll let you say it.
It's just my name.
I don't want to get in trouble for being derogatory against New Zealanders.
My Instagram handle, which is where I am on most socials, is Rory the Lynchpin. And I have a website, which is sisyphusstrength.com.
Sweet. Talk to you guys later. Good stuff. A few fucking edits in there, Chris. None.